Before the soul can see, the harmony within must first be attained, and fleshly eyes be rendered blind to all illusion. As you step beyond the veil.
Ground, it just here in the first 30 minutes of having you on. But let me go back to the artificial intelligence here for just a moment. Where do you think we are with this? Do you think that we are going to eventually see a Logan's Run type scenario where we have this artificial intelligence pretty much dictating every part of our life?
Well, it already is happening. I mean, in terms of the fact that now there are 2 generations in America without a family. And Common Core and dumbing down America where math is not important, it's kind of scary for people like me that came through old school where I learned Latin in 2nd grade. It's different. It's a different universe. And the kids today are lost in black holes called texting. You'll notice they're looking down in a void. And that technology is extremely fragile. When I say fragile, there's going to be a grid down. And when that happens, you know, you're not going to have your MTV. It's not going to work like that. And so
well,
I don't know. You know, there's other things happening that are scary, like bio APIs, computer chips that are put in water that you drink and or the air that you breathe, and you essentially become a laptop. That is what NASA is predicting by the year 2050 and the so-called Transhumanism and Avatar program. They're going to turn us all into laptops, like a hive.
Well, and
it isn't going to be like Borg, but it'll be like that. And you won't need a screen. You'll have your own implant computer. In the 70s, when I was working in anesthesiology, we were already working on a chip that you could drink, and it was site-selected. When it went down into the gut, it found its way up into the right specific point in the brain.
Wow. And psychological studies have shown that kids that are raised on the screen with the iPad or the phone in front of them, they become psychotic when you take that away from them. They really do. Like, they become...
Our national leaders. What?
Right, exactly. They become like rabid animals.
Psychotic. I am ashamed, and it's a disgrace what's happening in America right now, in my opinion. And I would like to vote for Pinocchio, because at least when he dies, we can know it.
That's great.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
And to realize that level of corruption is on every level, including the local. And, you know, for me, I have repeatedly said I'm willing and ready to be put on payroll and shut my mouth and go up and live a simple, quiet life up on top of a mountain farming. And I probably would be happy. The only reason I'm even doing this is because I'm a starving artist, and that's the only way I can promote my writings. I would rather go back to farming. I remember when I left the military because of what I was doing. This isn't what I went to school for. And I became a farmer. That's why I have written so many books just in farming. And I'm appalled at what's happening in the country and the fact that, well, who are you going to vote for? Well, who can't? I mean, there's no choices. And I remember the look on my father's face before he died when he realized he was no longer a Republican. I mean, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, they're a disgrace. And everybody knows exactly what I'm saying. Nick Beckett, a personal friend of mine, his younger brother, Mark, was a junior senator from the state of Alaska, and he refused to run a second term because he wanted to have nothing to do with it. Pelosi told me that everything is about leverage. That L. Ron Hubbard, Battlefield Earth, where you have something on everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Hillary Clinton and what she did, the last woman that did half that, they executed her in the electric chair 10 years earlier. And Trump Everybody's for Trump because he's, quote, an outsider. The only reason Trump is in there is for the money. It's about to hit a brick wall that will be meaningless, and that man is psychotic in getting us in a war with North Korea. That could happen in a heartbeat.
Or Iran for that matter.
Or Iraq, or let's go down the hill to Afghanistan. I remember all of war is about money. And I have a friend that collects Nazi memorabilia, and he has a nice little Ford Motor Company with a swastika on it. What does that suggest? And now Ford Motor Company is moving to Mexico. And how did Trump put it? We used to be that you made cars in America and you couldn't drink the water in Mexico. Now it's the other way around. Can't drink the water in Flint, Michigan, but they're making cars in Mexico. Now Trump has already shown his colors by changing his views on immigration and other kinds of things. He's a bigot. And worse, he's not that smart. And while he might think he is, because of all the money he has, his value structures and core belief systems are off from what I call human. And so that's what a demon is. These are qualities in us that we deem unworthy. Greed, lust, anger. Those are, if you go in the old books of magic, the old ones out of Merkaba Mysticism, the greater and lesser keys of Solomon, there it is. Second paragraph, quote, ownership is enhanced when shared with another. It's not about owning something, it's about being able to share it. And that's a magic construct. And, it's ownership is enhanced when shared with another. And the old grimoires that were written by Solomon the king, where he was going to cut the kid in two to find out who the real mother was, that guy wrote about angels and demons. And Enoch, the reason that Bible that was left out of the Bible was because it gave you the names of the demons. And that's the whole thing about exorcism. You're going for the name of the demon because if you know the name, you had control of it. That's the construct of what a word means, like jealousy. Once you know and you have identified something as a quality or a container, Beelzebub, Ashtaroth, all these different demon names, there's 72 of them. I taught a course in Georgetown, a graduate level course to Jesuits on 68 of those were identified to Babylonian star maps. They go back to the ideas of qualities in man that were deemed unworthy. And that's what a demon is. It's a scalar. It's a lesser aspect of self, like the sun hitting you and projecting your shadow. That's why in Jungian psychotherapy, the shadow and the projection of the shadow is those inner creepy things in yourself that you see in others. That's the only way you can see greed in someone else's because it lies in you. That's what made you God's favorite. You have choice. And you can choose to be this way or that way. And capitalism and that whole construct of money and the forms of government have been now shown to corrupt absolutely. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
That's very insightful, Dr. Miller, because I've always said that the devil is inside of us and it's something that we have to combat and conquer. And it's only through acknowledging that that part of us exists that we're able to overcome it. We'll be right back right here at Beyond the Veil.
Remember all those years ago when you couldn't sleep? Remember the dream?
Dr. Miller, we were talking about the Kabbalah, magic, and conjuring up these energies or these entities, these intelligences that reside just beyond the veil. So I know that when we look at modern technology, it's a culmination of physical work, but also spiritual work as well. Going back to the television, it was first designed in order to talk to, or at least listen to the ether, listen to entities that exist in that white noise. They called it the spirit box, first of all. And then it turned into a television projecting images. So how embedded is Kabbalic magic in modern day artificial intelligence and technology?
I don't know quite how to respond to that question. I'm not sure. I'm an authority in Merkaba, and so I can tell you that the physics of something is not real. What makes something real is your imagination. This morning, I posted on my Facebook page, you can get that at docram.com. I posted a quantum mechanical experiment that they did to show that if you're not watching something, it didn't happen. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that individually we're in small individual cavitations where we are creating our reality, and each of us is isolated because of the identity of ego? Ego is a survival coefficient. It's a tool for identifying and isolating parts of self for survival. At the same time, it also separates us one from another. And so at the one level of the hologram, that's a resolution of information. The fourth level is called you have your physical, emotional, intellectual plane. Intellectual plane would be the third plane. It would be distinguishing the difference between a chair and a couch in our thoughts. The one does one thing and the other does another, even though they are exactly the same in some ways. The fourth level is what's called the archetypal plane, where you are me, and I am you, and I am the walrus. That means that if I understand how something works, it becomes part of each of us understanding how it works. And that's why I would say that there is no original thought, and the choices that we make are what define who we are, what we actually end up doing at the end of the day. Now, you can do it kicking and screaming, karma, or you can flow. That's a good word. And it all has to do with the experience of the moment and the wonder of not knowing. Have you noticed that as we move through this part of space-time, moving forward in time, that we always seem to, the more we begin to understand, the more questions we have?
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think that means?
I think it means that our awareness is expanding, our consciousness is expanding, so we're realizing as we're taking in more information how much more information there is to take in.
It's the apocalypse.
So what would you think death might represent where there's a change in your consciousness? What kind of change might imply with this ground rule that as we move through to forward in time, not backward, in a cavitation ball, like into the out of, a white hole, black hole, right brain, left brain, Nibiru as a binary with our sun, everything can be seen in a metaphor as a cavitation process where there is a reflected wave. What happened at CERN years ago, before they started the singulate experiment, they experimented in the attempt to create a quark gluon plasma. Now, that type of plasma is known in string and knot theory as a membrane physics. Basically, what happened when they created the quark gluon plasma only exists maybe in the first 1/10 of a second of the Big Bang, and then everything from then on out, moving forward in time, mutates into, today, what we call elementary particles and our concepts of force and the relationship of one particle to another. Now, the more in quantum mechanics, and using that system for consciousness has a problem with it because it's called indeterminacy. That means that the more you know about one thing, the less you know about something else. That's Heisenberg. And so having that's based, that whole system of quantum mechanics is based on the measurements of space and time. But if space and time are integral variants of a subsystem, which it is in the holographic system, now instead of talking about the distance and the flow of time, which is to some extent illusionary in the time travel experiments I'm writing now, basically what happens is that there was a reflected universe created at the moment of the Big Bang that went backward in time. And I'm going to suggest that that moment going from the one to the other is called death. And death is, it talks about in Merkaba Mysticism as the missing sephira in the middle of the abyss called Dath. D-A-A-T-H. It's above Kether, and it's above, Tippereth, but not below Kether, and it falls in the middle of the abyss. And if you're going middle pillar, it's path 13, high priestess going from Tippereth or Christ consciousness to God consciousness, self-realization into God realization. You pass through death, going from one to the other. Imagine an infinity sign that you turn 90 degrees so it becomes a kind of what is that, where the sand pours through it? That's an hourglass.
Well, let me jump in for just a moment, Dr. Miller, because you raised a very interesting point. What happens at death? How does the consciousness expand? I would say that part of the human experience and the three-dimensional experience, whether we've come from a higher plane or a lower plane, is being able, well, not being able to, but a part of the journey is not remembering anything from before, so we can filter the information from a pure sense. And so we're purposefully limited in our perception here, so we can stay focused and learn whatever we need to focus while we're on this plane. At the point of death, obviously, that perception expands, and so we're able to remember maybe all of our past lives. Maybe we remember.
And then as you move backward, you don't become a child because it's not truly a water drop anymore. It's a cavitation ball. And this epoch was trial by fire. Now, it's a metaphor in the way of seeing what the possibilities of what consciousness is and what it is not. And you can talk about information as everything's in a point. Boom. And out it then starts expanding as a bottle. Let me give you a metaphor on that. A drop of water falls from heaven, and it hits a pool of water. What happens next? Well, one thing that we see happen is that the drop seems to go back up into the air. Not nearly as far as it fell, but it goes up a little bit, and then it goes up a little bit later, lesser and lesser, until it eventually, at some point, merges at a point of infinity because it gets closer and closer and closer to the thing as a cavitation ball. The waves that go outward from the splash could be called the future. And the waves that go inward and slap itself form an exclusion zone water, H3O2, that traps the medium it's went in as it pops back up. So it's no longer a drop of water. It is a special exclusion zone water with electrical and physical properties that make it extremely unique. And the air that it traps inside it is a torus. It is a topological surface turning into the out of. And that place is now being used at MIT for cold fusion processes.
Interesting.
That
We're
is
coming
my-
up. We're coming up to the end of the hour. Let's pick it back up in hour number 2. Before we go, though, give us your websites real quick. Any books, anything like that, please.
You bet. Thank you. Okay. Oh, so I'm at richardalanmiller.com, ALAN, or docram.com. And if you go /shop, you're there. And those are the books. And I have just recently uploaded brand new books. Nobody's seen them before, but my old books on the Encyclopedia of Alternative Agriculture, 9 volumes in ebook form.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. We have another jam-packed hour with Dr. Miller coming up in just a few moments. We'll see you right on the other side of the veil.
Phase 2 complete. Preparing to initiate Phase 3 momentarily. Brace yourself, traveler. We are about to venture into the realms of the unknown. www.beyondtheveilradio.com.
No hate, no hype, no fear. We are TFR. Frequency Radio.
Welcome, fellow traveler. Are you ready to journey beyond time and space? During this adventure, we may encounter otherworldly intelligences, but have no fear. We are protected by the spirits of our ancestors, and guided by messages etched in stone that echo through the ages. Now sit back, take a deep breath, and prepare to step beyond the veil.
Let's jump back into it with Dr. Richard Alan Miller. Dr. Miller, let's shift the topic back over to AI, because you recently had an encounter with AI, and I wanted to talk about that. That was first on the list. We kind of got off that topic. And also, I want to know how you became interested in the artificial intelligence study in and of itself. Please take us away.
I don't know where to go with that. I don't know that it would appear and feel as if I have an AI, because the speed at which it changes things it feels like it's faster than a human. Now, I know that I'm a person of interest, just like in that series, and that would be the first thing I recommend everybody watch is Person of Interest on Netflix. It's excellent and is accurate. There's several AIs. They're battling each other. Right now, I'm watching Quantico and how, you can't trust anybody. Well, an AI doesn't even work like that. And how I got interested in artificial intelligence was that when I was studying the Russian literature back in the early 70s, we would notice gapes in research. Like there'd be a whole string of information on cosmobiology, let's say, out of Czechoslovakia, Janov, others. And then all of a sudden, there were no more papers being published. Why? Did they figure it was noteworthy of study anymore, or did it go secret, dark? And that was why we had artificial intelligence on keywords to see if there was a relationship. And that's where I started developing serendipity and synergy. Synergy is where the power of the group is greater than the sum of the individual parts, the Buckminster-Fuller concept as an algorithm. Now, serendipity is when you ask a question and you get an unrelated answer that was also something you were seeking, but you didn't know it consciously. Those are two of the very early constructs of what a algorithm is. There is on Netflix a science thing called algorithms, and it runs it A through Z, taught by a mathematician that was teaching it to his classes in information theory. And there is a theorem in information theory that states if you have enough information to ask a coherent question, you have enough information to answer it. The structure of the question is where the answer lies. And that is what an algorithm is the way you organize your sets of information so that an answer falls out. And what I'm discovering is that there's all kinds of quantum computation algorithms going on everywhere. The mycorrhizae in the soil, the hierarchy of aggregates going from mycelium and small nematode thrip and microtubule, just the worms, whatever, that the way it resonates. There's a woman up in University of British Columbia that is forestry, and she's talking about, just like in Avatar, the movie, of a mother tree, the primary tree in a forest that is older than all the rest of them, and it has a network using mycorrhizae to network when a fire or a storm is going to go through and damage the forest. And there's like an early warning system. In solid-state physics, we call that a precursor wave and event horizon. And that means that you know about something is about to happen before it actually happens. And that it's called tunneling. And that's where Lockheed has now started moving their whole series of directions in the concepts of tunneling, where you no longer need encryption because your precision in moving a data piece from this point in what we call space to that point in space is now as accurate as 1.4 nanometers. And that's how they are using triggers for a new weapon that is being deployed everywhere called a neutron fullerene fusion bomb. And the precision of the trigger mechanism taking on what we call nanotubes of carbon filled with deuterium on a C60 molecule. And now what you have is a fusion device that you can put into a building like Building 7 and have a 614-foot steel beam fall at free fall and vaporize into space. There is nothing on Earth that will do that except the plasma. And so I think these weapons are being deployed everywhere, and that construct came out of artificial intelligence studies and how to tunnel with event horizons moving in such precision. This weapon, by the way, is being deployed everywhere. Yeah, Gaza and Golan Heights, it's everywhere. If you put nanofiber of this kind in an aircraft, for example, you could, at a flip of a switch, have no forensics. Couldn't find the aircraft. It's gone, vaporized. And so isn't that interesting, how that technology now exists? And the bad side of this is that when you take 60 carbon atoms, it forms a structure that's more than 100 times stronger as an allotrope. It's 100 times stronger than diamond. And that is what they are now making the so-called space bridge going into space, or elevator to our, space platforms. And it'll be a strong enough fiber that it could be set onto space like the Earth is. The thing that might happen after that is that you start building a structure that interconnects that, and that could be called a Dyson sphere if it were put around a sun, like Nibiru. Now, Nibiru is Stanford University. It says we are a binary, and there's the star, and there's the solar system, and Wormwood, all the other things that are there they are. The thing is that Nibiru's input signature pattern is not right, suggesting the possibility of an artifact around it, and that what we're really talking about is a cavitation process going from one state of consciousness to another in the binary system of a cavitation ball. That little ball that pops back up, if you look at your infinity sign, there's your binary. And my guess is our whole construct of what consciousness is sadly limited And I'm finding that my constructs in physics, as I'm starting to unravel them, seem to have validation in Merkaba Mysticism and the appendage to other epochal technologies. They used sound back then and dance, movement, like ghost dance and whirling dervish, that change space-time. And it was a technology that I don't understand. I'm now understanding resonance and how it starts with sound, because that's what the temporal lobes are about. And when you realize that there is another quality in man that we have yet to simulate, the emotional, how you feel about it, trying to make it more human, like a Bene Gesserit, where, you know, has the future and directs it by using the voice. It's I don't know where we're going on this, but NASA is suggesting that by 2050, humans will no longer exist. We will be somehow an avatar. Andre Norton, I think it was Andre Norton, wrote a book about the deep diving into Jupiter. And the way you did that is you had to have an avatar. You created a robot or a golem, there it is, that can survive high-end vacuum or high-end pressure on Jupiter. And your consciousness is up in space, directing the consciousness of this entity down in space, working in, I don't know, let's call it what we call reality. That's a good way to look at it. And that reality is just a subset of the possibilities of a multiverse. And the fact that you have memories of universes that your consciousness is not in, past lives, that kind of thing. I have a friend that always thought he had Native American blood. His mom told him he was half Indian, and he believed it. And but then he had DNA. He's a German and French. Didn't have any Indian in him, and it fragmented him. And the problem is, it shouldn't, because that's what we're all seeking, is enlightenment. And with that comes the dark night of the soul and the realization of never knew that it isn't as you thought. And now, what are you going to do? In one of my latest books, The Workbook 2, I open it by saying, everything happens for a reason, and everything leads to something better. And then it was, the Beatles, and it said, everything turns out and everything works out in the end. If things are not working out, that was John Lennon. He said, everything works out in the end. If things aren't working out, it's not yet the end.
Well, that's very true, Dr.
know.
Miller. Let me jump in for just a moment and just say the dark night of the soul. I've experienced that before, and I've got to say it's very intense going through it. But after the fact, the reshuffling, everything starts to fall perfectly into place. And there's two ways you can really...
It is. That's where, and you don't know how it's going to play, because it's not about the future. It is about the moment. You know, that's why time is not linear. It is not real, actually. And the future and the past don't really exist. What you have is that moment. And how you choose to, experience that moment determines whether it's profane or sacred. And that determines things. When you have 6 things laid out in front of you, and one of them stands out, that's important to me, and it'll vary for each of us, that is how your future timeline is talking to you. And you have options. And that's what makes this, man does not have free will. He has true will, because free will would imply you had full disclosure. And in this universe, this bubble that we're in, we can't have it by definition. The more we know, raising consciousness, the more questions we have than the knowledge base. In other words, the more I know I don't know. Now, that's the future. The past is the same thing, except that you have everything and that it becomes more fragmented as you become not a child, childlike in the way you do wonder. And the whole point is none of it's real. The only thing that is your imagination.
That makes you think, for sure.
Well, it's you're supposed in meditation, you're supposed to turn that part up, right? And allow the mind to go quiet. Good luck. I meditate. In the early 70s, when I'm doing all my physics and all the rest of it, I became a Satangi. I actually do the work. I meditate 2.5 hours every day. And then I started using toys to enhance it because I started late. And I wanted to go where saints go when I close my eyes. How do I do that? Well, I'll do a brain driver. I'll try to jumpstart my brain by taking LSD and producing lysergic acid amide, the aha drug, the chill that goes up and down your body. That place, that is dimethyltryptamine, and is the spirit molecule that Rick Strassman and others would suggest is how the brain creates God.
So are you referring to those pre-flight jitters that people get before taking a psychedelic?
Some of that is your body's response to neurotransmitter releases. And there's at least 8 of them that I have identified that are uniquely different one from another, that when put together to used as a tool, you can change the movie. That's what I'm experimenting on. I started 45 years ago with biofeedback equipment, learning how to control autonomic functions and things like allergies and my body's release of histamine, trying to consciously control how to change my heart rate, pulse, respiration, or a muscle group so that I could, using an electromyograph, reshape my back that was in distortion. And that was 45 years ago. I'm doing the same thing now with toys to enhance my visualization, because when you take specific neurotransmitters, or better, geometry, and meditate on them, it sets up resonance.
Well, let's get into time travel and teleportation right on the other side. Yesterday's guest talked about how to time travel and teleport through meditation and hypnosis. Maybe you can chime in on that. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Alan Miller is our guest.